Welcome to episode 12 of Josh and Reid Are Parents. Today, Josh and Reid discuss how to talk about good masculinity and how to find it. They also really want your thoughts on this one, so let them know what you think on Instagram this week.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 12 of Josh and Reid Are Parents. I'm Reid.
I'm Josh.
And we're parents.
We're parents.
Josh, do you remember, and how did we define toxic masculinity in episode 11?
Oh, man. I do remember, I think, for the most part. You should go back and listen to it. You should, too. Episode 11 was killer.
You missed it. Jump back in.
I think what we were talking a little bit about, like, the Andrew Tates and Jordan Petersons of the world, and especially how they defined masculinity. And it was really kind of about, like, boys having these impulses, and those impulses are good, and they should lean into it, and they should be, you know, dominant and even violent if necessary, and they should be like have sexual prowess at all times because that's what we care about, and like kind of lean into kind of the cliches of masculinity that have been like provided for us. By the way, actually not all the way throughout history necessarily, but definitely over the last 100 years inside of America. I think there's nuance as you go back into like history, but anyway, like leaning into like the classic like alpha male bro that is that, and like they're kind of like inserting themselves inside of the toxic masculinity discussion and saying, hey, everyone's mad at you for being a man. You should just lean into all of the like kind of basest impulses that you have because that's what we've been made to do.
Haters gonna hate anyway. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and then us, you and I think like dudes that are not terrible hear that and are like, I don't want that for my kid or for the people that we influence or the, you know, the people that are under our ministry or something like that, whatever.
Or for myself.
For me, I don't want that. I don't want Andrew Tate telling me what it is to be a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So then, but the question is this, like, and I think this is hard for us to figure out, like, how do we define it? So if we're not going to want them to be the people that are inserting themselves inside of this discussion, what our kids are hearing, then what do we want, like positively, like what do we want them to hear about what masculinity should be, right?
Yeah. And what we talked about was Christ as like this model, the person of Jesus being this model for peak masculinity, almost of like, this is what it could on when we're at our best. This is what it looks like. And the thing that you said as we were talking that has just captured my imagination in the last 30 minutes has been that he was always open to interruptions.
Yeah.
And that level of awareness of what's happening in others and their needs is remarkable to me, because he's not dominating to get influence. He's not domineering. Instead, he is open-handed and kind to his core.
Right.
The story that comes to my mind, I was journaling last night, and this story was one that came up just as I was journaling, is the woman who touches his cloak.
Right.
And he's like in this huge crowd, they're all pressing in on him, and the disciples literally are like, dude, what are you talking about?
Right.
What do you mean who? He's like, who touched me? And they're like, friggin' everyone, bro. Like,
right.
You mean like all of us? Or like, he's like, no, who touched me? And he like stops everything to make this point where he's able to then look at her with this great kindness and restore in some capacity her to herself, I guess, in a lot of ways.
Right.
And that level of open interruptions where he's like on the way actually to somebody else's house who needs healing, but he's like, wait, hold on, who touched me? And they're like, oh, all did. Just like that awareness of what's happening and humility to know like what's needed in the moment, I think is just a step toward that that other type of masculinity that might be possible.
Like letting Jesus be the catalyst, like the figure that we're heading towards inside of not just like our lives and our spirituality, but like of masculinity is like a thing I don't think I've heard a lot of people talk about before. Right. I think it's interesting. And I love that. I love that moment where like, who touched me? That's such a good one. There's also like, there's so many others. Like Zacchaeus rises, like this dude in the tree, like you know, he rises in my head. The children, like let the little kids come to me, and like how frustrated all the apostles were about these kids interrupting what's going on.
We don't have time for you.
Yes, we are busy, important men.
We have important stuff to do.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't rich. he didn't have sexual prowess,
Right.
and like he's like totally self-effacing at times.
Right. Right. Like talks like about it doesn't have.
willing to look like a fool
It's
to
right.
other people.
Right. Doesn't have
So
a place to even lay his head. Doesn't have a fiefdom
right.
that he's growing and
Yeah.
developing. Right. Like that's
Yeah.
not what he's
Yeah.
doing.
Mm, yeah.
And in so many ways, like it's kind of the antithesis of what like like the Old Testament kind of like king or Messiah had been, right? Like the
Yeah.
Messiah guy,
Yeah.
like which was
Yeah.
King David, right? And so like Israel had kind of had this king that was all of those things, like had hundreds of concubines and like lived like his sexual prowess was on display constantly, right? And he was
Yeah.
overtly and intentionally and intensely violent, right?
Mm,
Like conquering people with swords and armies and growing this earthly massive kingdom with walls and armies and structures and all of that. Like this is who they said, like this is
yeah.
what we see as king. This is what we see as the person we follow.
Mm,
And like first of all of that goes away. All of that's destroyed, right? All of that is becomes like it's just normal human stuff that turns to dust eventually, right?
yeah.
And then Jesus comes in and looks almost like the antithesis of David. Like he comes from his line, he is of that royal line and is the opposite version of him as a man, which I think
Yeah.
is like just really, really difficult for us to recognize and see inside of it, and is the opposite of what Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson push towards our
Right.
church.
Yeah. Like there's no like I'm the alpha, everybody bow down to me. Right. In fact, he rejects that
Right,
in the temptation story that we talked about last time,
right.
where it's like, no, like that's not what this is.
Like
That's
Reid,
not
he
what
was
this looks like.
actually specifically tempted by it.
It's right.
You know what I'm saying? Like in
Yes.
his humanity, he was like,
Mm,
there was a pull that he
yeah.
had to being in charge of everyone else. Right?
Hmm.
Like this is like from his masculinity, from his humanity, from the depths of him, there was
Yeah.
something that wanted that. And he said, that will not be who I am. Like,
Yeah.
no, that's not the kingdom of God, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And so these three words come up for us a lot in our conversations: courage, sacrifice, and responsibility. When we think about Christ as the model for masculinity, how does he capture those words? Because his courage looks different, I think, than a lot of the courage that we're offered.
Yeah. Yeah, like courage, like in popular culture, especially when it's like shown to males in
Mm.
like this idealistic way, is often like, I don't know, like looks like this like impressive athlete that goes out and performs mighty acts in front of people and gets
Yeah.
praise for those things. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like that's
Yes.
courage.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's necessarily courage. I think at the very least it's not the courage that Jesus displays most of the time, right?
Mhm.
Um I see Jesus being courageous in moments where he puts himself in like political and social peril
Yeah.
constantly,
Yeah.
right? Like talking to
Yeah.
people that he like should not talk to,
Yeah.
like intentionally saying out loud that he loves people that it is like everyone has agreed that we all hate. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Like sitting next to people that he should not sit next to, eating with people that
Mhm.
he should not eat with, again and
That's
again and
right.
again. And so we see
Yeah.
like I don't know, like a lot of people, this is interesting, Reid. Like a lot of people see this as not like courageous, they see it as foolish. And I'm interested in like kind of how do we determine that? How do we
Yeah.
tell our
Yeah.
young men the difference between those things?
Right. Yeah. I think of the story where they bring the woman caught in adultery and throw her at his feet.
Right.
And it's kind of just a political ploy to try to, like manipulate him and see if they can catch him out or something. And he does the most courageous thing, which is to still see her as a human being. Because I think what we're seeing right now in a political season, every season is a political season, but like in a heightened political moment every
Sure.
4 years, which is a
Sure.
presidential election, one of the things we're seeing is that like trying to catch the other side out in the political conversation so that we can then like dominate and whatever. In this moment where Jesus he rejects the premise entirely and still sees her as a human being and waits till everybody's gone so that he can still speak life back to her because he still sees her as somebody made in the image of God with value and worth and purpose and care. And so the courage to like wait that out is pretty remarkable, I think.
Yeah.
And then it also requires him maybe looking foolish to all those important people. Well, he just waits,
Right.
right? Like he just sits in it. And the courage to just sit in it sometimes is hard.
Man, maybe the hardest. Um, I hear in that like this idea that courage is seeing humanity and other people, like even when it's
Yeah.
hard, even when it doesn't make sense, even
Yeah.
when it's not fruitful or beneficial.
Even when it's politically like a death trap.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Like literally for Jesus.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Or like like the idea of being human, like recognizing my humanity and others' humanity, even
Mhm.
without like attractiveness or clout or purpose. Like it's just the fact that
Yeah.
other people matter.
Yeah.
Right. And this is courage. And Jesus was intentional and fierce about the fact that like these other people that you have decided do not matter greatly to me. And
Yeah.
that is what's like found tremendous courage in that, right? Like it's
Yeah.
see it again, 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 man.
Yeah. Which I think is a kind of a nice bridge to talk about that sacrifice piece for him,
Yeah, of
which is obvious with the cross, right? Like the ultimate
course.
sacrificial moment where he looks like a fool on the cross, sacrificing himself in this way. And his disciples kind of hang their head and are like, well, I guess we're just going to go home. But that sacrificial piece of giving of ourselves for the sake of the other, or for the sake of, in context of this podcast, for the sake of our children, um, and be willing to be interrupted by them, even
Yeah,
though I'm doing important adult things.
yeah,
My 6-year-old is not aware and just wants attention.
right.
Yeah.
The idea of like again, like connecting all of them here. The idea of having the courage to recognize that other people's needs need to be before me, right? Even when it's inconvenient, even when it hurts, even when it's
Mm.
overwhelming, right? Like even when it's hard. Like I think about this as like a manly trait. That like I think I would love for my son to know as
Mm.
being able to come into a home after a really hard day, after a crappy day, after
Yeah.
a day that was full of disappointment and frustration and confusion, and being able to be like tough enough and mentally and emotionally aware enough that like my needs in this moment don't have to be met. Like I will be intentionally aware of my family as I walk in this door,
Mm.
right? And like letting that like like as I don't know even like how there's so many other more important moments I think, but that's a really
Yeah.
important one I think for kids
Yeah.
to be able
Can
to
I
say
ask a
like,
question in that vein though?
well,
Because one of the things you've talked about before for our people that have listened all the way through is like the best thing I can do as a parent is do the work for myself.
yeah,
And so I want to connect it to this, what you're saying now. Um, I, I think the way, and you can correct me where I'm wrong. I think what I'm hearing you say is that I do that work so that when I get in this moment, I'm able to still be present. Is
that's
that
exactly right. That's
okay?
exactly what I would say. That's
Okay.
exactly what I would say because I think a lot of times, and this is, I just want you to know, I'm absolutely guilty of this. I think most people are. I think it's really,
Absolutely.
really hard to not to be like, but I
Yeah.
like so there's not like guilt or shame in this. But what there is though is the sense that a lot of times when I'm at my worst, when
Mm.
I walk into this house, is when I have had not the best day, or I'm tired, or I'm spent, and so someone else in my family, like my child or my wife, will have to bear that weight,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah.
think the work that I do is I begin to say, I can allow myself to feel feelings. I can allow myself to work through things. I
Mm.
can allow myself to feel stuff. And the sacrifice I make is to say, like, I'm going to do that lifting myself and
Mm.
not let someone else lift that for me as I walk in the store. And so I
Mm.
have presence and intention and purpose as I walk in to be dad, to be husband, to be me, not
Yeah.
just the weight of my day. I think that
Mm.
sacrifice in a lot of ways that I would want my kid to be able to develop and know and be
Yeah.
able to model for them.
Right. Yeah. Wow. And then that is that third word of responsibility,
Right.
which is that I'm responsible for my own stuff.
I
It's
love that.
at least in some capacity, right?
Right. Yeah. Well,
Like,
I think too, yeah, I think responsibility, I think the reality is,
okay.
Reid, that all of these words, can be parts of each other. And
Sure.
then
Yeah.
also they're so broad. There's so
Yes.
much here.
Yeah.
Right. I know like the thing we're talking about with courage and sacrifice, I think could be like
Yeah.
But I think there's so many implications of them. But in
Yep.
this, like another way that I'm really interested in responsibility is this idea of being like of when things are awry, when things are not good, when things are not as they should be. Like a man raises his hand and says, like, I'm gonna figure that out with you. Like I'm gonna stand in the gap there, and not instead of
Yeah.
just saying like, I don't know, someone else will deal with this. Do you know what I'm
Mm.
saying? Like
Yeah.
rising to the occasion to be like,
Wow. Yeah.
this is tough, but like I can be responsible for it. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times I'm not. That's not my first instinct. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like letting that be like a man. I see Jesus doing that consistently again and again and again, like multiple times where Peter is like, we don't really need to get involved in that. Like, Jesus, please stop messing around with those things, right? Like, and Jesus again saying, like, no, like this is the purpose. This is we're going to stand where people like really don't want to stand because there's humanity behind it, right?
Mm.
Because there's people behind it, and it matters that we
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
this.
Mm.
So giving that as like a
Mm.
responsibility to as a man to be able to like stand up and say like I will do the right thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of ties back to what I remember us talking about last time with the fruit of the spirit a little bit,
Right.
which is that like in the fruit of the spirit, we hear things like self-control. And that there's something about that the spirit is bringing that about in me. It's not just a self-determinism thing where I'm saying like, I'm going to be self-controlled today.
Right.
Because at some point my will to be, whatever I just fizzles out. Like it
Right.
is a muscle that I can grow and improve at for
Right.
sure. But like there's also a piece of like giving over to the fact that on those bad days I'm going to trust the spirit's going to empower me to carry into those moments in some way that is still loving and kind and gracious and gentle, even if I might not in the moment feel like it's possible.
Right.
um
Right.
yeah.
I see this as just like a full contrast
Hmm.
to the male masculine like theme that we're given to in like in so many other ways
Yeah.
of like I do what I want when I want to, and I am my own person, and
Yeah.
my self-control will come at the expense of other people's like humanity, basically.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Hmm.
That I'm a man and I have needs, right? Like
Yeah.
this is the opposite of the fruits of the spirit. This
Hmm.
is and I like there's so many interesting things inside of this. Here's what's a really interesting, fascinating way of looking at that particular statement. I'm a man and I have needs has been used throughout history to be able to say like other people better fill those needs for me or else,
Yeah.
right? Like you better give me what I want or what I need or how I do it or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
instead, if I actually use the fruits of the spirit as like who I am and work through them and ask the spirit to be a part of me and all this kind of stuff, being a person like that can actually be like a place of humility.
Hmm.
Like I'm a man and there's things that I don't have. There's things that I'm not full and complete. And so I need others to help and to like fill in these
Yes.
gaps. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like it makes it a wholly different like thing I'm saying to them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And um and so then the thing that I'm like, as a parent, if I'm if I can connect to that humility and the fruit of the spirit, I'm able to then have a long view
Oh yeah.
where I'm able to be for my child when they feel like they have like their world is falling, is crumbling, like in sixth or seventh grade. Like every sixth or seventh grader ever, at some point, it's
Sure.
like all my friends are abandoning me. Everything's falling apart. The sky is falling literally on my face.
I don't like
And
the way I look. I hate the world right now, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Everything sucks. Can it like what's gonna, I can
Right.
be as a parent, I can be the long view for my child to hold
Yeah.
space. To not say like, oh, that's not real, but to say like in that, I want you to know that this isn't the end.
Yeah.
That there is my phone's ringing, that there is a future, and that like I'm here with you in it, and I can sit in this, and I have space for you in it.
I think it's such a cool thing to think about as a parent parenting these things, like helping our young men have these things and develop them. Because I think a lot of times especially when I work with parents that just feel overwhelmed by moments, which like, it happened. I mean, I feel overwhelmed by moments with my kid all the time, right? But
Yeah.
like what happens, and I see this, I don't know if it's even just with the people that come to counseling, but I think I see it in a lot of people. My kid is not strong enough or like tough enough or resilient enough or like responsible enough or like whatever the thing is that we're trying to build into our young men and our young women. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and they feel like, oh my gosh, like if he doesn't have this thing, then when he's 25, he's gonna get fired and he's gonna go to jail and like he's gonna be like he's never have a future and I won't. Well, I mean, like, they just roll this like catastrophic view of themselves instead of saying like, okay, this is what he needs now. Like this is what we have to build into him, right? This is what we have to grow. And this is how we create boundaries. And this is how we create purpose is that, okay, so we don't have enough responsibility. Instead of it being like completely outmatched by that, begin to say like, okay, well, that's our aim now. That's what we line ourselves up. I think it's a much more purposeful way of parenting than like the one just parenting straight through fear,
Yeah. And because like grit and resilience and toughness are not an inherited DNA thing.
Right. You have to grow those, right?
They're a muscle to be grown over a long period of time.
Right.
And sure, I mean, there are some people probably like anything else that maybe because they've seen their parents do it, they've seen a model of like, oh, that's what resilience looks like. So they might have maybe an aptitude for resilience, maybe, but like, I really don't think that's even like, yeah, like it's like it's just a muscle to grow,
right,
or a skill set to lean into.
As a matter, like they're not supposed to have this when they're children, and
Right.
we grow that into them as they become older.
Yeah.
I'm interested in this, Reid, and we don't have to stick here for long because I think these are hard questions, but I'd like for us to, I don't know, bat this around a little bit and maybe even make this about a little bit of how we approach this next episode. But like the idea of childhood inside of this, I think one of the things that we talk about inside of masculinity is like, how do we get these young men to be this thing that we want them to be in the future, which I think it's a worthy conversation and one we need to have. But I think that the inside of that conversation needs to be like, what is it like? It's okay for boys to be boys, right? And that has connotations in other ways that we've had before, correct? Like, oh, well, boys will be boys. But the flip side is like it's okay for them to be for childhood to be a thing. Like they don't necessarily need all of these characteristics of a grown man when they're 8 years old, And so like thinking about allowing children to be children, like
there you go. Yeah.
generating childhood as a positive thing, not as something to rid ourselves of. And thinking about like connected to that, what does it mean to like go through this kind of rite of passage thought process of like, hey, I want you to see this thing that's coming, and after that, there's going to be some new expectations on you. I want you to grow towards that.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on all that? Because that's tough for me.
Yeah. The first thought I have is one of the things I serve every once in a while. Whenever they need somebody, I'll go into our His Kids worship during church during the sermon, which is like 3-year-old through kindergarten, and then like some first graders and some second graders. But I love to go in there, and each week they tell a story, but then they aren't just like telling a Bible story to say we told a Bible story. They're telling a Bible story and they're asking I wonder questions for the kids to then wonder about. I wonder what this was like. I wonder what you think about this. And just hearing the reflections from 3 through kindergarten is astounding to me every time.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful example of the fact that in childhood, the ability and the space to wonder is not just like something that maybe we should do something, but like it's like critical to cultivating young people that know that their voice matters, to know that they matter, to have spoken out in a community like that before, and spoken into a story as they understand it. And that there's never like, well, actually what it means is like, we're not then following up to say like, ooh, sorry, you got it wrong, 3-year-old. like we're
actually,
just saying, wow, okay, so what else did we hear?
Like, have you stuff like that?
Yeah, we let the kids be kids and wonder what they're wondering.
Right.
And just hearing that happen every single time, I'm so blown away, and I'm so thankful for the way that happens. And then you like stretch that out into middle and high school with the ages that I work with. That then gives us a framework to ask bigger questions, and our kids still already have that wonder background where they're wondering with us in the story about what's happening, and then how might we live that now and those sorts of things. So it's really, really powerful to see just cultivating for 20 minutes on Sunday mornings, 15 minutes on Sunday mornings, a time to wonder with your kids is a huge blessing, not just to them individually, but then to our community as a whole.
I love that. I think like anytime I hear a reflection from any child at any age, like 3-year-old, like a 15-year-old, I'm always like, ooh, this is such good stuff, you know, like so good when they reflect and think and consider like what they're, I love that. I love cultivating that is really cool.
Yeah. And I do like the idea of maybe reclaiming the phrase boys will be boys, not in like the toxic way, but in that, like, maybe like you said, like bigger, like kids will be kids.
Yeah.
Like kids are going to do stuff that's like, wow, I can't believe you just did that.
Right.
Why did you think that was a good idea? Well, they wanted to try and see what was going to happen. I didn't know it was going to happen, so I tried. You know, like they have that genuine interest in figuring it out. And so as a parent is like, how do I scaffold with safety that's also not then like helicopter parenting, that sort of thing, you know?
Yeah. I think so much of that comes down to like we don't have to celebrate all of their choices, but we also don't have to be afraid of them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Right? I bro, we cannot, like, you're not allowed to get the Kool-Aid out of the thing, pour your own. We can't do that. Like, that's not something we do. But instead of being like just so overwhelmed by the mess, being like, this is the thing a kid does. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is how a kid learns not to do things.
Yes.
Right?
I asked Henry the other day at dinner. He was not wanting to eat, and I said, he was like, I really want some ice cream. I was like, I understand. I hear that you really want some ice cream, but let me ask you a question. When you eat ice cream or you eat candy, what happens to your body? He's like, well, I get like a lot of energy. I'm like, okay, so tell me more about what that's like. Like, he's like, I just feel like whoa, I get so much energy. I'm like, really? How long does it usually last? He's like, it kind of goes like this.
It's so weird.
And I was like, yeah, exactly. And so I'm wanting to eat things that are going to let you go more like this and last longer for your night and day. And, you know, we just had, and then it led to like an actual conversation where he was actually aware of why I want him to actually eat the food that was for dinner and not just let him have ice cream or candy or whatever.
Right.
And just to be able to have that conversation, I was like, man, this is so interesting to me and also hilarious and pretty much pretty perfect for a 6-year-old to be like, well, kind of goes like this.
Feels amazing though. I really like it, but it goes
it's like, whoa. I'm like, yeah, exactly. That is what it feels like.
Oh man, that's so
He's
good.
like, I really like to run around my room after. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, I know all those
sure
things
do.
That's absolutely right, bud.
Oh man. Yeah.
I love that. I love thinking through like how do we help kids navigate and grow and understand better choices instead of being completely overwhelmed by their bad ones. And I just want to be really clear. I'm going to stop right here. Like, there's no judgment at all for that. Like, I'm in the midst of that because parenting is really hard and it's really scary. Right. So like, I understand where the fear response comes from. But by the way, I think we just come back to this every single time. Right. Every single time we have a podcast, we're talking about how not to parent through fear. And I think that it is the most important thing that parents can figure out. Like, so let's angle it from like, how do I help my kid be my son be a non-toxic masculine kid? Right. Like, how do I do that? Well, I can't do it through fear. I'm saying they can't start from the places where I'm really afraid. It's going to have to be from places of purpose and intention and guiding him towards, these courage and sacrifice and responsibility. You know, cultivating those things that we've been trying to talk about. Here, I really want to do this, Reid. I want to hear this is a challenge I have for you, and it's a challenge I have for our listeners. I want to hear moments of people that have already like have older kids or whatever that have worked through moments where they've tried to figure out how to help them become a young man or a young woman. Right. And like what that looked like. So like moments where like I had to talk to them about this thing that like, or we had to like tell him that this was not something we do, whatever it is, something where you figured out in that moment, like, this is what we had to do to manage how to be a young man or a young woman. Right. I really want to know from that. And then also just from people that are in the midst of parenting, like what are moments that you're afraid of, moments that you're interested in, moments you have questions about, that talk about like, how do we talk about, masculinity and femininity in a way that's purposeful and meaningful, that isn't unhelpful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So hit us up here on YouTube, hit us up on Spotify, I think has a place where you can ask questions. We're going to do it on Instagram a
Put
ton.
on the Instagrams.
Yeah. We'll be on Instagram. We'll keep peppering you with those questions. Answer those. We'll throw some questions and some thoughts that you guys send to us on the next pod. And we'll try to see if we can answer that ourselves. I don't know if we have answers to that, but we'll see what we can come up with.
I'll make up something.
Yeah, we'll make up something. Reid, that's episode 12, my guy.
That's episode 12, baby.
Let's go. I love it.
Fun.
We'll see you guys on lucky number 13.
Hey, thanks for listening.
Bye.